Ambassador to Afghanistan. I'm also pleased to acknowledge the Wilson Center's chairman, Ambassador Joseph Gildenhorn, and his wife, Alma, and our vice chairman, David Metzner, and our other board and council members. Afghanistan is a nation of tremendous importance to the United States and to the world. It is a nation at the crossroads. Afghans have suffered 25 years of war, often due to foreign intervention, yet they have also experienced nearly 5 years of hope for a better future. Afghanistan faces enormous challenges, defeating the remnants of the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, developing an economy that is free from dependence on the narcotics trade, ensuring that the sources of political unity and integration overcome the forces of disintegration. On all of these tasks, it is in both the national and the moral interest of the United States to be a strong partner of the Afghan people. And it is our great good fortune to have in President Hamid Karzai an extraordinary leader to partner with. He was born to a distinguished family in southern Afghanistan. During the Soviet invasion of the 1980s, he emerged as a leading figure among the Afghan resistance as both an advisor and a diplomat. From 1992 to 94, he served the post-war Afghan government as deputy foreign minister. When the Taliban seized power, President Karzai rejected its offer to serve Afghanistan at the United Nations. He moved to Pakistan, where he was a leading figure in opposition to the Taliban regime. In October 2001, he re-entered Afghanistan to organize the Afghan people in opposition to the Taliban. President Karzai was chosen by his countrymen to lead the interim administration of Afghanistan at a conference in Bonn, Germany. In June 2002, a council of the Afghan people selected him to head a provisional government. In September 2004, he was elected to a 5-year term as the first democratically elected president of Afghanistan. Hamid Karzai has been widely praised for his personal courage, diplomatic skills, and vision of a stable and prosperous and democratic Afghanistan. Achieving that vision will demand considerable effort and political will in the months and years to come. He has graciously consented, after he makes his formal remarks, to take a few questions. President Karzai, we welcome you to the Wilson Center, to Washington, D.C., and we look forward to your remarks.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much. With lighter shoulders, it's better. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Mr. Hamilton, members of the board, thank you very much for having me here today to speak to you at such a distinguished gathering of scholars. As a matter of fact, I like the name of your institution, Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars. I wish I can be one of you guys someday later. When you're in university, in college, there's nothing better to be known as a scholar. It's a great honor that you have, and I hope we can get it someday too. Much better than the president, by the way. Now, I asked earlier Mr. Hamilton, I said, what am I to speak about today? And he told me that you'll be facing a distinguished gathering of people who know about Afghanistan, that you can go to any length or depth on the issues of the country. I will divide my time over describing the situation today, the reasons of our past troubles in the way forward for all of us, for Afghanistan and the United States and the rest of the world, as we are speaking at the Institute in the name of a person, President Wilson, who was an internationalist, which is what we in Afghanistan very much want America to be all the time. Afghanistan's difficulties, Afghanistan's misery began with the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. The invasion of a country that was deeply believing, a deeply believing Muslim country, very traditional, centuries and centuries and centuries old in values and way of life. As I remember as a young kid back then, before the Soviet invasion, we were a society deeply connected to our history, with full pride, rather more than what we needed for our future towards our history. So we were a country looking towards history rather than towards the future. That was a problem. Now, to such a country, the Soviets came with communism to impose it on a very traditional, very proud of its history, and a very deeply believing Muslim nation. They tried to impose communism on us. We began to fight them. And in our struggle against them became refugees, millions of us. Almost 6 million of our people became refugees. I'll put my hat on. Almost 6 million of us became refugees in Pakistan and Iran, and the elite of the country, by which time we had quite a bit of them, quite a lot of them, almost 300,000 to 400,000 of us became refugees in Europe and America. Those were the people that we had educated over 4 or 5 decades. The resistance against the Soviets was helped from our neighborhood, mainly from Pakistan and partly from Iran. To this resistance came massive resources from outside. And to this resistance came another imposition. The Soviets were imposing on us communism, and through this resistance came the imposition of radical religious beliefs. They tried to radicalize our resistance in a religious way, so to defeat the Soviets sooner and easier. The neighbors had an interest in spreading radical religious activities in Afghanistan for other reasons. So the country, Afghanistan, the society, was sandwiched between two pressures, the pressures of the left and the pressures of the right, that really weakened us. Both tried to destroy our fabric. Fortunately, both failed. But the consequence was that we were weakened a lot within ourselves. The Soviets go, the West withdraws from Afghanistan, forgets about us completely, and we keep telling them that there is trouble brewing in Afghanistan, that the radical religious forces that have been brought into Afghanistan from all corners of the world and from within Afghanistan and from the neighborhood have very dangerous ideas and methods for trying to spread their way of life around us and to you. No notice was taken of us. And as I had mentioned the other day in Canada and before that, because we did not matter to international politics, or to the way of life of the rest of the world. We could neither sell to you nor buy from you. So it didn't matter. We could not buy the products of the world. We could not sell to the world. So we were ignored. In spite of our warnings repeatedly. And why did we warn? Because we had personal stories of the hatred that was being preached in that part of the world, of the way Afghanistan was made home to the most dangerous minds, full of hatred against all of us. They began to kill Afghans. They began to destroy our mosques. They began to close schools. They began to insult women. They began to do all that was possible by way of destruction and hatred. And to explain in vivid terms as to what we were facing there, I'll narrate one of the stories to you. I had a cousin of mine working in the Afghan demining agency in Pakistan. He was an office manager. He would come and have dinner with me every other day. One day he came to me and said, Hamid, I saw something very shocking today. That there were two young madrasa students, what's called the Taliban, to his office for some work. And one of the very young students, maybe 15 or 16 in age, told him that he wished to have a skirt full of bombs to throw at New York. This is 1998-99. And I said, did this young person tell you that? He said, yes. Now, who is this young person? He's an Afghan refugee, very poor, uneducated, studying in a Pakistani madrasa. He wouldn't know New York exists. He wouldn't have heard of New York under other circumstances. So who is it that's talking to him of New York and that's also talking to him of hatred towards New York? Why would this 15, 16-year-old boy hate New York? Normally, a 15, 16-year-old boy who knows New York would love to get to New York, would be in a hurry to visit New York and be here in America. And I conveyed this to the U.S. ambassador. I went to see him in Islamabad. I said, Ambassador, this is what I heard. And plenty more. But when you arrived, and while we were struggling, I'll go a little before, while we were struggling against the Taliban, against this very idea, the Afghan people I found to be much wiser than we, the educated part of the country, were. They would always tell me, Hamid, we can't liberate the country without the United States. So go and bring U.S. involvement to Afghanistan, and then we'll be free. We'll have the Taliban out, we'll have the terrorists out. Al-Qaeda was not then known in the name of Al-Qaeda. They were known as terrorists and Osama and things like that. September 11 occurred. The United States came to Afghanistan, and the Afghan people joined in the struggle against them. And we were successful in less than a month and a half. Afghanistan was liberated. Life began. Millions of Afghans came back to Afghanistan in less than 3 years. We had 4.5 million refugees come back. Afghanistan became once again the home of all Afghans. Roads began to be built. Democracy began to arrive. Freedom of the press. All that, you know, the good things of life. So our war against terrorism paid very well for Afghanistan and paid also by extension for the security of the world. The question that we should be asking today at this center is, have we won completely? Or is it still something that we have to do to be sure that we are safe in the future? No. We still have a lot to do in order for the United States to be safer, in order for us in Afghanistan not to fall back to terrorism, in order for the rest of the world to be safer. And what is it that we should do? What got us in trouble? You had your Twin Towers blown up because you in the United States failed to connect as the world had become globalized. That a mindset in my part of the world, in Afghanistan, preaching hatred to younger generation of our country, could hurt us in America. And us in Afghanistan were hurt because we were so weak as not to be able to prevent what was coming to us from the neighborhood of Afghanistan. Therefore, for all of us in this world to be safer, we must remove the need for groups, organizations, or state entities. Now here I'm beginning to be very careful in my remarks, so it will have meanings elsewhere. Or state entities' reliance on religious radicalism as instruments of policy. We relied in that part of the world on religious radicalism as an instrument of policy in our war against the Soviets. The more radical you were, the more resources you got. The more hate you preached against communism, the more resources you got. That method was applied after the Soviet Union was defeated, in trying to have a foothold in Afghanistan. And that method, by the law of unintended consequences, hurt you in America. Not that they intended to hurt you. The states, I mean, not the terrorists. The terrorists did want to hurt you, and they did. So, somebody was playing with extremism, radicalized religious activities as instruments in that part of the world for expansion or for protection, whatever. We are not going to go into that. And that was used by those extremist elements that were benefiting from that support for purposes that the original party did not intend to have, but it did get reach you in New York. The question I'm putting here is, has that exercise ended by the intervention in Afghanistan? Or is that exercise of reliance on the use of radicalism as an instrument of policy still continuing? I would tell you it is still continuing. The continuation of the trouble in Afghanistan, the increased attacks on Afghanistan, the cross-border activities in Afghanistan, the loss of your soldiers, the loss of Canadian soldiers, the loss of Afghan women and children, the burning of our schools, the burning of our mosques, the attack on our children going to school, and the killing yesterday in Kandahar of the Director of Women's Affairs Department is the continuation of relying on radicalism as instrument of policy. My message today is to this distinguished body that we as societies and those who act on our behalf, the governments, must make sure that no entity in that part of the world relies on radicalism as instrument of policy. In order for us to be safe, we'll have to bring ourselves to an end there of this method. And if we do not, we will continue to suffer. In other words, military action in Afghanistan alone is not going to free us of terrorism. Going to the sources of terrorism, where they get trained, where they get motivated, where they get financed, where they get deployed is necessary now. Extend this to madrasas in Pakistan, or places called madrasas in Pakistan. Not madrasas, they're not madrasas, they're places called madrasas, where young, poor, unaware, uneducated children from the poorest of the families are taken and preached hatred and hatred alone. Against me, against you, against any other person in the world. And they are told, go, kill yourself in Afghanistan, commit suicide, and kill as many as you can of the international community or Afghans. And the instant you are dead, you will be in heaven. The instant you are dead, you will be in heaven. To a boy of 7, keep preaching that till he's 14. You will have a suicide bomber. So for scholars here today, and as advisors to the governments, my word would be, there will not be an end to terrorism unless we remove the sources of hatred in madrasas, the training grounds, and the reliance of some entities in that part of the world on extremism as instruments of policy. That will be my theme as I go around, and we must succeed in order for us to be secure into the future. Thank you very much.
The President will take a few questions. We have microphones, I believe, at the sides. Just raise your hand if you have a question. We'll begin with Mr. Hathaway here. Bob, there's a microphone coming to you.
Mr. President, thank you for a very inspiring address laying out many of the problems you and we collectively face. I want to ask you about an issue you didn't mention, and that's the war in Iraq. Anecdotal evidence suggests that this war is unpopular in Afghanistan to the extent that it aids those who want to preach that the United States is anti-Islamic, or that the American presence in Afghanistan is as an occupier. Have you found Iraq to be a complicating factor for you as you deal with your problems?
No, sir. Definitely not. I have not come across any Afghan that has spoken to me about Iraq. Not at all. And the young boy of 17 or 15 or 16 who in 1999-98 said he wanted to have a skirt full of bombs was way before Iraq or Afghanistan. This was 1999-98. Those who hate us for whatever reason, they did hate us before 2001, and we suffered because they hated us before 2001. In my remarks, I did not go to one point, which I did refer to a little bit, is that we should not be happy about inaction against those people before 2001. We would have been safer perhaps today without the losses that we have. But no, Iraq is not in the minds of the Afghan people, not at all. They don't relate it to Afghanistan.
A question in the back, Hala. And
Mr. President, you did not address the problem of poppy and opium cultivation in Afghanistan, and what we hear, the income is going to be something like 3 billion. What is the central government doing, and who are the beneficiary from that? Thank you.
I thought I could avoid things like that by talking about radical religion. But anyway, it is a very serious problem. It is what also that's feeding terrorism. And it's an embarrassment to us, the Afghan people. But it is, as much as we hate it, as much as it is an embarrassment, it is also, unfortunately, a reality, an economic reality. How did we get to where we are now on drugs and the poppy cultivation of Afghanistan? If I had gone describing the misery of Afghanistan in detail, I would have come across poppies and I would have told you about it. Ma'am, when the Soviets came to Afghanistan, and when this war of liberation began against them, and the subsequent interventions after the Soviets left, and the droughts also that came afterwards, left the Afghan people so desperate, so unsure of their tomorrow, that no family in the country knew if they were going to be in their home the next day, if they were going to be in their own country the next day, if they were going to have their children the next day, if they were going to have their property the next day, if they were going to be alive the next day. I know people in southwest Afghanistan who destroyed their pomegranate fields, which is among the most beautiful orchards, to replace them with poppies. I know people who have destroyed their vineyards to be replaced with poppies. So that kind of a desperation drove people to easy grow, easy sell crop. The easy grow, easy sell crop was poppies because it had buyers from outside. When you grow other fruits, other crops, you'll have to take it to the market. This was the only crop that did not need the kind of water you needed for other crops, did not need the kind of effort that you needed for other crops. And the buyers came to your doorsteps. That's why it became a reality for 30% perhaps of the Afghan economy. The question is, how do we get rid of it? By the Afghan commitment to eradication, to destruction, to law enforcement, to the strengthening of our institutions, and by the international community's commitment to helping Afghanistan. From today, for another 5 or 6 or 10 years. I was very naive about this problem 4 years ago. I thought we were going to eradicate poppies and next year there will be other crops there instead. No, I was wrong. We would have to have a serious, dedicated effort by us and the rest of the world to be able to get rid of it perhaps in 10 years from today, not sooner than that.
Another question here. Yes, Jim. Let's get the microphone in there, please.
Thank you. Mr. President, thank you for addressing us. I wonder if you could discuss the conflicting role of the Mujahideen within Afghanistan, from their role fighting against the Russians to their possible role in the war in Iraq?
Sir, the Mujahideen have no role in. You mean the Afghan Mujahideen or the bad guys who also caused us a lot of trouble? There is no connection between the Afghan Mujahideen and what's going on in Iraq. The Afghan Mujahideen that fought the Soviets, they also were part of the struggle against terrorism together with the international community. Most of them are in Afghanistan, and some of them are with the government, some of them are in the parliament, some of them have begun engagement in other walks of life. those who are engaged in Iraq, in terrorism, in car bombs and destruction, are the kind of people that we drove out of Afghanistan as well, terrorists. The kind of people that I spoke about earlier, people who hate us all, regardless of what we are. They hate everybody. They hated Afghans. We were the poorest of the Muslim world, and the most sacrificed one for Islam. We gave great sacrifices for Islam. And yet these people, Osama and his associates and Al-Qaeda and the Taliban, they killed us. They trained their guns on us. They destroyed our mosques. They burned our vineyards in Parwan province, north of Kabul. Is these people, they will kill you in Iraq, regardless of what religion you are? They will kill us in Afghanistan, in spite of us being the most believing of the Muslim world and the poorest of the Muslim world. They killed us first for so many years before they got to you here in America. It's a mindset of hatred against all of us if we don't look or think like them. They're not the Mujahideen. They're different people. Terrorists.
Another question here, and then one in the back.
Mr. President, it's a great honor to have the opportunity to speak with you today. My question for you is, what steps would you recommend the American government take today that we are not taking to address the tremendous hatred that you have witnessed personally that are coming out of the so-called madrasas located in and around Afghanistan? What can we do today that we're not doing that you would recommend? Thank you very
sir,
much.
these madrasas, fortunately, are not in Afghanistan. They're mostly in Pakistan. And a lot of Afghans come to me and say, make madrasas in Afghanistan so that we bring all those children out of those madrasas to study in Afghan madrasas, real religious education, not terrorist education. I think it's a responsibility for us, the Afghan people, our brothers in Pakistan, the Afghan government, myself and President Musharraf, my friend and colleague and brother, and the United States to address this problem effectively and sooner rather than later. It's a huge problem. It has grown over years. There are thousands of madrasas. And those thousands of madrasas are not a problem. They teach religion perfectly well, and it's good. There are some of them who are not madrasas, who are training grounds for terrorists of extreme ideological trends, who are training young people against all of us, against us in Afghanistan and against you in America. That we have to close them or do something to do away with them in order for us to be safe. And the United States has a great role to play in that, with us and with Pakistan as a partner in the war against terror. So basically, close them.
Okay, all the way in the back.
Addressing that issue Friday at George Washington University, President Musharraf said these madrasas account, and he didn't minimize them, account for about 5% of the schools, mostly in rural areas. And if I understood him correctly, Pakistan's way of coping with this is to have alternative, broader education schools to attract students to them. You called President Musharraf your friend and brother just now.
Yes,
is
sir.
he being vigorous enough, do you think, in dealing with this issue? And what do you think specifically the President can do to be of help in your three-way meeting tomorrow?
I'm glad President Musharraf spoke about madrasas and the problem that they present to us. As I said earlier, the thousands of madrasa students who go to real madrasas, to real religious schools, are not a problem. They're decent people like any other decent human being. They go and learn religion, and then they become mullahs and imams, and that's perfectly good. We need preachers in all religions. The problem is with what I said earlier of those places acting in the name of madrasas but teaching hatred and terrorism. And those places have to be closed by action, by arresting the runners, the masters of those madrasas, the organizers, by simply closing them down. And I hope President Musharraf and I and those who help us around can address the problem effectively by going and simply closing them and arresting those and imprisoning those who preach hatred.
Okay.
And of course, when money is needed, then President Bush can help us.
Mike, and then Robin will be next down here.
Mr.
Mike.
President, at the beginning of September, a young American woman who has run a NGO, non-governmental organization in Kandahar for 4 years, was here to launch her book. And I guess one of her conclusion was that the warlords outside of Kabul, the warlords control towns and countryside by day, and the Taliban controls much of it by night. Compared to the corrupt warlords, the Taliban, in the eyes of many people, don't look so bad. Could you comment?
It isn't like that. No warlord is in control of any town in Afghanistan. That's 4 years ago. We have governors and district chiefs appointed by my signature in those places. Now, maybe some of those district chiefs are bad, but we can at any time remove them and replace them with someone else. The warlord problem is gone. We had a serious problem 4 years ago, 5 years ago, not today. We have disarmed thousands of people. We are making a national army and a national police force. The Taliban problem is not related to warlords. It's a problem that comes from an ideology that we all are trying to fight and get rid of. Extremism. People who want to take us back to dark ages, motivated by interests that are illegitimate and harmful to a healthy society. Drug lords. Osama, Zawahiri, the likes of them, it's the same people like them. Now, there are thousands and thousands of Taliban who are in their homes, who are working, who are farmers, who are students, who are shopkeepers. They are not a problem. The problem is with those, a limited number of them, who are part of this circle of hatred against all of us, against me in Afghanistan and against you in America, that do not accept what we are doing. They don't like the freedom of the press. They don't like a television channel. They don't like you to speak. They want you to be blind and deaf and to follow him and only him and nothing else. These are the people who would beat people 5 years ago in their homes if they were listening to radios. Thousands of such incidents have taken place in Afghanistan. And it's the same people that came to New York to blow up the Twin Towers. No warlords anymore, especially not in charge of provinces. They may be there harassing people secretly and then denying it. like any common criminal. But no district in the country, no province in the country is in the hands of warlords. Sometimes they do fight each other, but then deny as well, and we get to them. We're past that stage. The country is now much united and together with an administration, though not as good an administration as we would like to be, because we don't have the human capital. No, it isn't like that, sir. I know who told you that, Sarah Chase. I know her. She's a good friend of mine. I don't think she said that, by the way.
Robin?
Mr. President, as a member of the Woodrow Wilson International Center board, I'd like to say that anytime you want to take a sabbatical and come here as a scholar, you'll be welcome. My question for you is deals about the poppy issue. Mm-hmm. And how much do you think the inability of the developed countries, the United States, particularly in Europe, our inability to deal with agricultural subsidies, particularly, how do you think that plays into the poppy situation?
Agricultural subsidies. Well, Afghanistan was, sir, before 1979, among the biggest exporters of raisins to the world. It was agriculturally a self-sufficient country by that time. We had our own wheat, we had our own barley, our own corn, and the best fruits. Afghanistan has tremendous potential to grow back there. We already did, perhaps in a way, other than droughts. For example, last year, we need in Afghanistan 5.5 million tons of, grains for our food, for our need. Last year, we, within 3 years, produced 4,750,000 tons of food in Afghanistan. This year, because of drought, it fell back to 3.5 million tons. We can easily go back to being a very strong country in fruit production and other forms of agriculture. But it will take time and the development of an economy. Now, we have, say, in a part of Afghanistan called Faryab, the best grapes. But Faryab has no roads connecting it to other parts of the country. Therefore, the grape owners can't sell their grapes. They rot there on the trees. We have another part of the country, Samangan, the best almonds in the world, perhaps. But they can't bring them to the Afghan markets and from Afghan markets to international markets. So if you develop the Afghan economy, infrastructure, the poppy problem will be much easier to attack than it is now. So infrastructure, infrastructure, infrastructure. The orchards we'll build ourselves. You build us the roads, we'll give you the best grapes here in America, in the Woodrow Wilson Institute.
Okay, there are a lot of hands up. John here, then we'll go to Ellen, and then David, and that's probably about all we can handle, those three. John?
Now, to answer the U.S. part, give us more roads.
All
right.
John?
Mr. President, today's op-ed section of the Wall Street Journal includes a guest column by Senator John Kerry that paints a very negative picture of the military situation in Afghanistan, facing U.S. troops and our Afghan allies. I don't know if you've had a chance to read the op-ed, and if you can give us your own assessment of the military situation that we face together.
Sir, when the coalition came to Afghanistan in the year 2001, the Taliban and their associates were thrown out in less than a month and a half because there was a willing Afghan population. And that willing Afghan population embraced the international community, and the international community embraced us. So this very successful partnership was created that enabled us to achieve everything as was required of us by the Bonn Agreement. the emergency Grand Council that selected the president, the government, the other law Grand Council that gave us the constitution, the presidential elections in which 8.5 million participated, the parliamentary elections with 7.5 million participants, the rights of women, the emergence of women in the Afghan parliament, 28% of them, some of them getting votes by their own force and their own ideas, and a growing economy, an economy that was giving us $180 income per capita in 2002, which is giving us now $355 income per capita, which it may look nothing to you here in America with 40,000 or something that you're getting as income per capita. But for Afghanistan, it means a lot, from 180 to 355. I'm not going to disclose to you our foreign reserves. I'm going to tell you that we had only $180 million in foreign reserves 4 years ago. Today we have a lot more. If I told you that, the ambassador would report it to his government and there would be no more help to us. So, but I will. Today we had, in 2002, only $180 million in our reserves. Today we have over $1.9 billion in our reserves. That was all possible because there was this partnership. Now, we focused on certain issues and we got where we wanted. We did not either get time or perhaps skipped us. I don't know what to say there. Focus on another very important issue, that was the training of the police for Afghanistan. We trained the army well. We did the political institutions well, but we did not concentrate on the police in time. So the districts around the country have a power vacuum. No law enforcement there the way it should be. That the terrorists from across the border are using to hurt us. Now that we have applied force, you will see that the situation will be much, much better. So get us a strong police force and we will do well. And we have already won. It's now completing the win. And completing the win will bring us back to what I described earlier in my remarks, going to the sources of it. I have one agenda. You won't shake me. I'm keep going there, you know.
Two very quick questions and we'll conclude. Ellen and then David.
Mr. President, we've talked about your large neighbor to the south. I wonder if we could talk to the neighbor to the west, Iran. How would you characterize Iran's policy towards your country today, particularly towards the minority groups that it has a deep interest in? And is the fact that U.S.-Iran relations are so troublesome, does that have any impact on you? And do you think there's any advice you would offer to get U.S.-Iran relations to a better place?
Very good question, ma'am. Afghanistan was very lucky in managing relations between Iran and America. Lucky because also both these countries were very wise. With regard to Afghanistan, I should make that clear. With regard to Afghanistan, they were very wise, both of them. They cooperated very well in Afghanistan. The Americans understood that Iran was our neighbor and a big neighbor with which we had a lot of relations. The Iranians recognized that the U.S. presence in Afghanistan was basically good for Afghanistan and for the security of our country, and the war against terror had to be won there. So that understanding by both of them and the initial cooperation through the Bonn Agreement, in which Iran was also a party, enabled a smooth working relationship in Afghanistan between the two and Afghanistan's relations with both. We have not encountered any difficulty. Well, strains along the way do come between America and Iran, and sometimes it appears as if it will be reflected in Afghanistan. Fortunately, very fortunately, so far, that has not been the case in Afghanistan. So, touch wood.
One final question, David Metzner.
Mr. President, to finish up on a positive note, could you tell us a little bit about the economic development program and reconstruction? You had the development conference, I think it was in Tokyo. A lot of commitments being paid in that were made. What is a yardstick that we can take from here as to how reconstruction is going? Most
Good.
of our press is on the warfighting side and not on the reconstruction side.
Very good. Very good. The pledges that were given to Afghanistan by the international community were mostly fulfilled. We are very grateful for that. For America, for Japan, the Europeans, everybody delivered well to the pledges that they made. Afghanistan recognizes that, and Afghanistan is extremely grateful. We made very good progress in road building. Now, when I say road building, it doesn't negate my earlier remark for asking more roads. No, I mean highways. We built some of the highways, but the country needs a greater network of roads to connect to the villages and the districts. 5 years ago or 4 years ago, we would travel in Afghanistan a distance of 600 kilometers in 24 to 38 hours of a torturous journey. Today, the same 600 kilometers is traveled in 4.5 hours, especially if you have a Toyota Land Cruiser. It takes you immediately where you want to. The same is true in other parts of the country where we have roads. Thousands of schools, 3,500 I believe, the Minister of Education is not here, 3,500 new schools and reconstructed schools were built. Is he here?
Yes.
Oh, we're sending it. 3,200? You keep sitting at the corners. That's the trouble. 3,200 new schools and reconstructed schools are there now in Afghanistan. The health service to the population in 2002, 2001 was only 9%. Today, as I'm talking to you, it's 80% basic health service availability to the Afghan population. Doctors, hospitals have grown better in cities. We can offer some sophisticated treatment as well. In a country that was completely destroyed of infrastructure. About 5 months ago, I went and inaugurated with the French First Lady a very good hospital that conducted an open heart surgery on a little girl successfully. So a lot is taking place in that regard in Afghanistan. I spoke of the economy, investment. I just about a few days ago inaugurated a $25 million investment by Coca-Cola in Afghanistan. A very sophisticated, state-of-the-art, production line was set up there, which the owner told me, an Afghan owner, in collaboration with Coca-Cola. Telephone sector has grown like wild in Afghanistan. 4 years ago or 3 years ago, we sold a license for a mobile telephone company for $4 million. Yes. Just about a few months ago, we sold so many licenses for each one for $40 million. Each one. Construction. $4.5 billion have come of private investment to the country, mostly in construction. You think of Kandahar, and you think of the Taliban and their attacks. I was talking to a businessman, a Kandahari businessman, some months ago, and I said, how many houses are constructed in Kandahar? By people, private. He said, over 10,000 houses. In the past 3 years, 10,000 houses. Now, take that to be from $50,000 to $200,000 on average. That would get you nearly $500 million of construction activity only in Kandahar. Almost major cities have their roads asphalted, which never were asphalted before. Now, if I keep going, there's a lot of reconstruction activity that has already taken place in Afghanistan. But I was reminded this morning by Ambassador Newman in my conversation with someone who was visiting us. Take this construction activity in Afghanistan against the background of total destruction of Afghanistan's infrastructure and economy in the past 30 years. It may seem little to you against that backdrop. But a lot has happened in Afghanistan, and a lot more needs to be done in Afghanistan over the coming years. Now, I've mentioned only a few areas. There are massive areas of other growths in the country. Trade, yes, I like to talk about that. Pakistan's exports to Afghanistan in the time of the Taliban their great buddies and allies, was $25 million annually in 2001. The highest that it grew in 2001 with the Taliban was $25 million annually. Today, as you and I are talking, Pakistan's exports to Afghanistan stand at $1.3 billion. With Iran from $10 million, today we are talking of nearly $400 million. With China, if you'd like me to tell you that. A lot of increase in trade with Tajikistan, with everybody else. So when you come there, it's the center of the world.
We've had an extraordinary opportunity to visit with the President, and we want to express to him our gratitude for coming to the Wilson Center and for the extraordinary way in which he has responded to questions from you. And I think they've been very good questions, have they not, Mr.
Very,
President?
very good questions, yes.
Now, we want to ask you to remain in your seat while the President and his party departs with your expression of appreciation.
And I will ask... I have a remark here. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, ladies. I have a remark here. As scholars, please do concentrate on my theme, the sources of trouble, the sources of terror, religious extremism, in your research and your advice to governments. Unless we get rid of that, we will not be safe.
President, thank you very, very much. Great pleasure to have you. We wish you well.
All the best. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Barim bakhair. Barim bakhair. Good.
Oh, that's good. I'll wait with these people.
Right. All right.
No, he said goodbye. Yeah.
The security was inspecting. Everybody has to remain in this room.
Would you please remain here? The President has not yet departed. Yeah. Where is he now? Well, give me a signal when it's clear to go. I might say to you all that the reception tonight for the dinner will begin at 6:30. Dinner, I think, around 7:15, and Mr. Negroponte will be the speaker. Excuse me just a moment. Please stay where you are for just a moment longer.